Every fairy tale begins with hope. A young girl meets her prince charming. They fall in love and they live happily ever after. But sometimes the fairy tale is nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. And when that illusion shatters, the truth beneath can be deadly. This is the story of Caroline Crouch, a 19-year-old woman whose life ended in the most tragic way imaginable. But this isn't just a story about murder. This is a story about deception so elaborate, manipulation so complete, that it fooled an entire nation and challenged one of Europe's most experienced police forces. July 12, 2001. Caroline Crouch was born in Athens to David Crouch, a retired engineer, and Susan Della Costa. She was a girl with her whole life ahead of her, full of dreams and possibilities. When Caroline was just 8 years old, her family made a life-changing decision. They relocated to the island of Alonissos, a stunning coastal paradise where azure waters meet white sand beaches. David and Susan had fallen in love with the island's natural beauty, and they wanted to give their daughter an idyllic childhood. And idyllic it was. Caroline embraced her beachside life with passion. She became an avid scuba diver and swimmer, spending her days exploring the underwater world that surrounded her island home. She was happy, carefree, and surrounded by a loving family. But on Good Friday, 2017, everything changed. Caroline, just 15 years old and still in high school, met a man who would alter the trajectory of her life forever. His name was Charalambos Anagnostopoulos, but everyone called him Babis. Babis was 27 years old, 12 years Caroline's senior. He was a commercial helicopter pilot, financially well off, charismatic, and by all appearances, the perfect catch. He knew how to make an impression, and what an impression he made. Picture this: a teenage girl in her classroom looking out the window when suddenly a helicopter appears overhead. The pilot waves. It's romantic. It's dramatic. It's the kind of thing that happens in movies. For Caroline, it wasn't a movie. It was her reality. Babis had flown his helicopter over her school to get her attention, and it worked. What Caroline didn't know, what she couldn't have known at 15, was that this wasn't romance. This was the beginning of a carefully orchestrated trap. Babis was charming and attentive. He showered Caroline with attention, made her feel special and grown up. To a teenage girl, being pursued by an older, successful man can feel validating and exciting. She thought she had found her prince. A year and a half into their relationship, Babis proposed. Caroline was still underage, but she would turn 18 just 3 days later. On July 15, 2019, barely 3 weeks after her 18th birthday, they got married. But here's what's crucial to understand. They didn't have a traditional Greek wedding. No family celebration, no gathering of friends, no joyful ceremony with loved ones in attendance. Instead, they eloped to Portugal. To Caroline, it may have felt romantic and spontaneous. But looking back, we can see it for what it truly was: the first step in isolating her from everyone she knew and loved. After the wedding, the couple settled in Glyka, Nera, a suburb on the outskirts of Athens. To the outside world, they appeared blissfully happy. Their social media was filled with pictures of a loving couple living their best life. Smiling faces, romantic gestures, adventures together. But social media rarely tells the whole truth. While their Instagram feed painted a picture of wedded bliss, Caroline's private writings told a very different story. In her diary, entries from 2019 reveal a young woman questioning her relationship. She wrote about fighting with babbies, about how serious those fights had become. She mentioned planning to leave, to go stay with her sister, unsure if she could continue in the relationship. But there was a complication. Caroline was pregnant. In July 2020, Caroline gave birth to their daughter. She was now a mother at just 19 years old, and in her diary, dated that same month, when her baby was just 1 month old, she wrote something heartbreaking. "Today my little one is a month old. It's also the day I told babbies I want to leave. I feel awful." Another entry revealed her inner conflict. "I stayed with him, so my daughter would not grow up without her two parents." Caroline was trapped, not just emotionally, but financially. Bob Biss controlled the money. He was the sole breadwinner. Even when Caroline's mother Susan would send money to help, Bob Biss would take it. In her diary, Caroline wrote, "I love Bob Biss so much that I can't leave him, even though this relationship hurts me." This is the reality of coercive control. This is what manipulation looks like. A young woman, isolated from her support system, financially dependent, with a baby to care for, convinced that she loves the very person who is hurting her. By May 2021, the relationship had deteriorated further. Phone records from the days before Caroline's death show combative, argumentative texts between the couple, even though they were at home together. They couldn't even speak to each other in person anymore. Caroline had attempted to book a hotel room for herself and her daughter. She had sent a text to a friend threatening to leave Bob Biss. She was planning her escape. But on May 11th, 2021, just days after the couple had purchased land to build their dream home, Caroline would never get that chance. May 11th, 2021, 4:30 in the morning. The sun hadn't yet risen over the suburbs of Glyka, Nera. According to the story that would initially shock Greece and make international headlines, Babis was awakened from sleep by 3 masked intruders. They burst into the bedroom where he and Caroline were sleeping with their 11-month-old daughter nearby. The men were armed with pistols. They overpowered Babis, tied him up, blindfolded him, and covered his mouth with duct tape. Then they went after Caroline. The intruders, speaking with Greek and Albanian accents, demanded money. They asked repeatedly, "Where is it? Where is the cash?" To understand what happened next, you need to know something about Greece in 2021. After years of financial crisis, many Greeks had lost faith in the banking system. Bankruptcy was a constant threat, so people kept cash at home, sometimes significant amounts. Bob Biss and Caroline had 10,000 euros hidden in their house, money they'd been saving for construction costs on their new property. Caroline's parents had also given them 50,000 euros as a gift to purchase the land. Under threat, Bob Biss told the intruders where the money was hidden. And here's where it gets interesting. The cash was concealed inside a Monopoly board game box. An unusual hiding place, but effective. The intruders took the money, but they didn't leave. They ransacked the house, room by room, stealing jewelry worth 20,000 euros and anything else of value they could find. According to Bob Biss's account, the situation then escalated into pure horror. The intruders held a gun to their infant daughter. Caroline screamed. Ba Bis, blindfolded and bound, fought against his restraints. But there was a rope around his neck. Every time he struggled, it tightened. He fainted, regained consciousness, fainted again. When he finally came to, the intruders were gone. The only sound was his daughter's crying. It took Ba Bis approximately 30 minutes to maneuver close enough to his mobile phone. Unable to use his hands, he dialed emergency services with his nose. The call, filled with muffled words because of the duct tape over his mouth, was brief but desperate. Robbers came in. Send help. At approximately 6 a.m., an hour and a half after the supposed break-in, first responders arrived at the scene. What they found was horrific. The house was in chaos. Drawers were open and empty, belongings scattered everywhere. The living room and kitchen looked like they'd been torn apart. The Monopoly box lay open on the floor, a silent witness to the violence that had occurred. A security camera had been ripped from the wall and lay on the living room couch. Its memory card was missing. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was on the staircase. Hanging there by her own leash was Roxy, the family's 7-month-old husky puppy. She had been strangled to death. Upstairs, in the main bedroom, first responders found Ba Bis still bound on the floor. His eyes and mouth were covered in duct tape that extended down his neck. His hands and feet were tied behind his back. On the bed lay Caroline, face down, her pale skin immediately indicating to the responders that she was deceased. And beside her mother's lifeless body, their 11-month-old daughter was crying, clapping her hands, pushing at Caroline as if trying to wake her up. The little girl was physically unharmed, but the psychological trauma was immeasurable. She would grow up without her mother, having spent the last moments of Caroline's life lying beside her corpse. When Ba Bis was freed from his restraints and saw Caroline's body, he went into what appeared to be genuine shock. Grief-stricken, devastated, the picture of a husband who had just lost the love of his life. The officers immediately began their investigation. Based on Ba Bis's account and the state of the crime scene, they determined that 4 men had been involved, 3 who entered the house and 1 who kept watch outside. They reconstructed the events as follows. The intruders approached through a dirt road leading to the rear of the property. After failing to break through the back door, they removed security pins from a basement window and entered through there. They murdered the family dog to keep her quiet. They then went to the bedroom, subdued Ba Bis, and confronted Caroline. They ransacked the house and took the money from the Monopoly box. And before leaving, they smothered Caroline with a pillow. The autopsy revealed devastating details. Caroline's death was not quick. She suffered for approximately 6 minutes. Bruises across her body showed she had fought back. Marks on her lips and tongue suggested sharp objects may have been used. There were no signs of sexual assault. This was murder. Brutal, calculated murder. Based on a glimpse Ba Bis claimed to have gotten when one attacker's hood fell off during a struggle, police created a sketch of the suspect, an overweight, dark-skinned, tall individual. Ba Bis also identified the weapons used, a black pistol and a silver Colt. A massive investigation was launched. Nearly 100 people were brought in for questioning. Police divers searched a nearby lake for the weapons. Officers combed through CCTV footage from the neighborhood. But they found nothing. No fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses who saw anything suspicious that night. It was as if the criminals were ghosts. But investigators aren't easily fooled, and the more they looked at the evidence, the more things didn't add up. Let's start with the basement window. Ba Bis claimed that's how the intruders entered the house. But investigators noticed something. The window was extremely small. The suspect Ba Bis had described was an overweight, tall man. There was simply no way someone with that physique could have fit through that window. Strike one. Then there were the neighbors. Babis claimed the house had been ransacked violently, but not a single neighbor reported hearing sounds of destruction, no crashing, no banging, no sounds of drawers being ripped open or items being thrown around. What did they hear? A puppy crying in distress. That's it. No sounds of a house being trashed, no cries for help, no screaming infant. Strike two. The house itself presented problems with Babis's story. Despite the supposedly violent home invasion involving three men ransacking the property, there were no fingerprints, no DNA evidence, nothing. And then there was the question that several investigators raised. Why would armed intruders tie up the man but fight the woman? Typically, home invaders would subdue the physically stronger person, the one most likely to fight back. Why would they leave Babis tied up but spend time struggling with Caroline? It didn't make tactical sense. Strike three. But the real evidence came from technology. And this is where Babis's carefully constructed story completely fell apart. Remember that security camera? The one Babis claimed the intruders removed from the wall and took the memory card from? Data from the camera revealed something damning. The memory card was removed at 1:20 a.m., hours before the supposed break-in at 4:30 a.m. Someone removed that card before the crime occurred. Someone who didn't want the camera recording what was about to happen. Caroline was wearing a smartwatch, one that monitored her heart rate continuously. The data from that watch painted a clear timeline. At 3:58 a.m., her heart rate indicated she was asleep, calm, resting. At 4:05 a.m., her heart rate spiked by 50%, indicating severe physical and mental stress. She was in distress. She was fighting for her life. At 4:11 a.m., her heart stopped. This was before the time Babis claimed the murder took place, before he claimed the intruders even arrived. And then there was Babis's own fitness app. The app on his smartphone tracked his movements, and according to that data, Babis was moving around during the exact time he claimed to be tied up and immobilized. He was active. He was walking. He was free. Police tried to recreate Babis's claim that he dialed emergency services with his nose while bound. Multiple officers attempted it. Not one could successfully do it. It was virtually impossible. The evidence was overwhelming. The inconsistencies were undeniable. The story Babis had told was a lie. And investigators had one more piece of information. They had found Caroline's diary. They had read her entries about wanting to leave. They knew about the text messages threatening to leave Babis. They knew about the hotel booking. On June 17, 2021, just over a month after Caroline's murder, police confronted Babis. They showed him the evidence, the timeline from the smartwatch, the data from his phone, the impossibility of his story. For 8 hours they interrogated him, and finally, he broke. What Babis confessed to was both the truth and another lie. He admitted to killing Caroline, but his explanation was designed to minimize his culpability, to shift blame, to paint himself as a victim of circumstance rather than a cold-blooded murderer. According to his confession, on the night of May 10th going into May 11th, he and Caroline got into an argument. He claimed they were fighting about their daughter, that Caroline wanted to take the child and leave. He said Caroline threw their infant daughter into the cot and told him to leave the house. He claimed Caroline became physical first, that she pushed him and punched him, that his judgment became clouded, that he lost control. He claimed self-defense. He claimed passion. He claimed it wasn't premeditated. But the evidence told a different story. Here's what actually happened that night. Babis strangled Caroline. When she fought back, he took a pillow and pressed it over her face using his full body weight. He suffocated her. For 6 minutes, she struggled. For 6 minutes, she fought for her life. And for 6 minutes, he held that pillow down until she stopped breathing. Their 11-month-old daughter was in the room. She witnessed her father murder her mother. After Caroline was dead, Bobbis set about creating his elaborate hoax. He considered disposing of her body but realized it wouldn't work, so he decided to frame someone else. He staged a home invasion. He ransacked his own house, making it look like burglars had torn through their belongings. He opened the Monopoly box and scattered the pieces. He took jewelry and hid it. And then, in a calculated act of cruelty designed to add authenticity to his lie, he killed Roxy, their 7-month-old puppy. He strangled her with her own leash and hung her from the staircase. He placed his infant daughter next to her dead mother. And then he tied himself up, carefully crafting restraints that would look convincing but from which he could eventually free himself. He put duct tape over his eyes and mouth. He waited. When enough time had passed, he freed himself enough to reach his phone. He made that call to emergency services, complete with muffled words and desperate pleas. And then he waited for first responders to arrive so he could play the role of grieving husband and traumatized survivor. In his confession, Bobbis said he deserved to be punished. He said he owed everyone an apology. But even in his confession, he tried to shift responsibility to Caroline. He claimed she had become aggressive after their daughter was born. He painted himself as a man driven to violence by his circumstances. But the diary entries don't lie. The text messages don't lie. The evidence doesn't lie. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't self-defense. This was the final act of control by a man who couldn't bear the thought of losing his power over his victim. The case became known as the murder that fooled the world. For weeks, all of Greece had been searching for the phantom home invaders. The story had made international news. People were terrified that violent criminals were targeting homes in Athens suburbs. And all along, the killer had been hiding in plain sight, playing the role of devastated widower, accepting condolences, attending his wife's funeral, holding their daughter while cameras flashed. Bobbis had been so confident in his deception that he hadn't even bothered to destroy key evidence. The smartwatch data, the phone records, the fitness app information, all of it remained, waiting to expose his lies. In May 2022, Charalambos Anagnostopoulos was charged and found guilty on multiple counts: premeditated murder, perverting the course of justice, lying to authorities, and animal abuse. He was sentenced to life in prison plus an additional 15 years. But no sentence can bring Caroline back. No punishment can undo the trauma inflicted on her daughter. No amount of justice can restore what was taken from Caroline's parents, David and Susan, who lost their daughter to the very man she had trusted with her heart. Caroline Crouch was just 19 years old when she died. She was a young woman who loved the ocean, who was passionate about diving and swimming, who dreamed of building a home for her family. She met someone when she was too young to recognize the warning signs. She fell for a fantasy of romance that masked a reality of control, and when she finally found the courage to leave, it cost her everything. This case reminds us of several crucial truths. Age gap relationships between adults and teenagers are inherently problematic. They create power imbalances that can be exploited. Isolation from family and friends is a major red flag in any relationship. When someone tries to cut you off from your support system, it's not romance, it's control. Financial dependence can trap victims in abusive relationships. Economic abuse is real and devastating. And perhaps most importantly, when someone says they want to leave, when they threaten to escape, that's often the most dangerous time. Statistically, Victims are most likely to be killed when they try to leave their abusers. If you or someone you know is in a relationship where they feel controlled, isolated, or afraid, please reach out for help. There are resources available. You don't have to face it alone. Caroline Crouch deserved so much better. She deserved to see her daughter grow up. She deserved to build that dream house. She deserved to live. Instead, she became a cautionary tale, a reminder that fairy tales can be deadly illusions and that some people are willing to kill to maintain their control. Rest in peace, Caroline. Your story will not be forgotten.